Hi, I'm Mike Henry, and this is my Procreate 4.2 demo for the piece I call The Little Helpers. So starting in 2016, I did a Christmas piece of Santa, which you can see right here, and then in 2017 I decided to add Mrs. Claus to the mix. There she is, with her hot cocoa gun. And so I thought, who better for 2018 than the elves? So let's get started. Right off the bat, I knew what I sort of wanted to do. I wanted to do little tiny elves, and I wanted to do some sort of like slightly new spin on them, like just using shapes, nothing too dramatic, just hey, maybe I'll do elves like this or I'll do elves like that. And so the first thing I had to do after I did that little rough of them all stacked up was I needed to figure out what the elves actually look like. And that's what this is here. It's just a super fast bit of previs to try and figure that out. You can see that I adjusted some of the proportions, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's their relative size to something else, and all that kind of stuff. So this is just like a real fast test. The only thing that I would say really works in that original rough that I did not do is I like the size of the hat better, but it's fine because I think that the size of the hat that I ended up going with for them is more like sustainable as a design, but I like that really little one. And so now it's just about going through this stack that I had made. I liked the general shape of it and trying to figure out the best way to do like individual personalities and little individual interactions. So I knew that the first one on the bottom was going to be sort of like, okay, well, what's he doing? Well, he's holding everybody up, so obviously he's going to be dealing with a lot, so that's his expression. Next guy up, he's just happy to be there. Maybe he's a little bit of a dum-dum, but he's like really positive, something like that. And then I start getting into the more complex interactions. I mean, it's not like, this isn't like a mech transforming in an anime or anything like that, but anyways, so the next one up is, of course, one guy trying to hold up another one, and that one's upside down. And then there's the one to the right who's just sort of like, he doesn't realize all the chaos that's happening. There's the one holding him on, and she's also dealing with this other sort of dummy up at the top, and she's clearly yelling at them about, you know, the fact that, you know, you're tearing everything apart, you know, something like that. She's maybe the one who's got her shit together. And so that was the premise for each one of the individual designs. I thought that they all worked out pretty well, so I decided to go from there. What you see here is now my not final lines, but just a clean line so that I can sort out all of those ideas and make sure that it all is working for me. So again, I'm not really concerned about how good the lines are here. It's just about cleanliness and information. That's it. As a friend of mine pointed out on Facebook, which I'm so happy for, that this thing is littered with tangents. This thing was actually quite a pain in the butt, simply because the look and feel of these three pieces is without a lot of line variation, and this was a somewhat complicated arrangement, and I was just trying to bang it out before Christmas, so there was a lot of just, oh hey, there's a lot of tangents here. Well, keep going, because it's sort of a tangent nightmare in general. To some degree. Now, I did not leverage tangents like you could in certain art styles where you were doing it on purpose, but I mean, this is supposed to be a little chaotic, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that would say, well, yeah, just because it's chaotic doesn't mean you're supposed to have a bunch of tangents, blah, blah, blah. But you know, everything that I do on this channel is for fun, so that's why I didn't really stress about it. So this here is what the clean line pass looks like. You can see the rough underneath it, and now we keep moving forward into the final lines. So let's go ahead and zoom in on this guy at the bottom, and you can see the slight difference between the clean lines and then what ended up being the final lines. So as I said before, these types of pieces, the ones in this series, don't really have a whole lot of line variation, but there's enough there that it's not just a simple line. I have to sort of pick and choose my battles so that I'm bringing emphasis to the right areas. You can watch as this goes through exactly where I choose that. And this is probably going to be the last piece in this series, simply because I don't really want to go so nuts to where I'm doing like, you know, the reindeer houses or anything. Like, I'm not trying to build like an IP Bible here or anything like that. It was just sort of a fun one, and I feel like, you know, Santa, Mrs. Claus, elves, that seems like the right list kind of thing. So This will probably be the last one for the series, and then next year I'll try to do something new for Christmas, and just see where it takes me. Maybe just because it's always fun, I'll do something in a completely different vibe. Like I'll do something heavy, or I'll do something maybe not directly related to Christmas, but somehow hinting at Christmas. I don't know. I'm just rambling at this point. I don't know what to tell you. Right now, you just have to stare at me drawing all of these elves. So I'm sort of out of things to say. That probably means I should just shut up. So I'm going to shut up and let it go until we get to the color stage. Peace. That wraps up the final lines. Here they are, with a little bit of the sketch underneath, so you can see that contrast. And now we move into colors. So I colorized the lines to a blue, a very light blue, and set it to multiply. That's what I did in the past pieces. A lot of this is repeating the same techniques so that I can make them all look like they're together. Of course, I'm doing each one of these a year apart, so I'm having to do a little bit of archaeology and go back and see exactly what I did. I did duplicate my Santa piece and bring it up to the top of my stack of files so that I could go into it and reference it, and I could turn off layer effects and all that kind of stuff. I don't remember the exact brushes I used, and Procreate has slightly shifted their brushes around, so I just tried to mimic it as best as possible. For these sort of initial bigger flats, I'll just leave it zoomed out like this. I think on YouTube you should be able to see this pretty large, so I don't think it's that big a deal. As for the colors of these guys, I didn't know where I wanted to go with it. I knew that I didn't want them to be red like Mrs. Claus and Santa. I like that visual hierarchy of like Santa and Mrs. Claus represent like maximum Christmas, and then there's the elves that are sort of like the tertiary colors. It's funny to say tertiary and then point at green, but anyways. But here I'm doing like I'm just going with my gut and filling it all in. Of course, as you know, I keep everything on separate layers, and since these little elves are all wearing the same uniform, I can color shift these layers and it'll affect everybody, and that just makes sense. So that was my mentality around this. So here, in order to keep the palette simple, I'm dealing with just green and white. I thought that this would make sense. I still like it because I like how simple it is, but then I end up taking it a little bit further. Again, I don't remember what brush I'm using here, but the point is that the original pieces had a lot of translucency to some of the blue behind it, and some of the colors would intermingle, and so I just tried to make sure that I was doing that here as well. So I used a brush that would allow me to do that. So now I thought, okay, let's bring a little bit of red into the sleeves, so that we can give them almost like these candy cane arms. But in an already chaotic piece, this isn't the best idea. It creates, I mean, quite literally a striping, but a tiger striping. A lot of the time in character design, I'll refer to a really messy color blocking scheme as tiger striped, and really what I mean by that is just it creates more noise than you want, and you're not able to group sort of like the visual functions of a character. So with this, we've got all of these characters. They're all piled on top of each other. They all have very dramatic shapes. They've got these big round heads with these little thin noses sometimes. They all have thin ears. They have these really little peg-like feet and stuff, or legs. And with all of that noise going on, having these candy-striped arms is maybe not the best idea. So eventually I'll start exploring how I can combat that. The interesting thing about this and the other pieces in the series is that they don't really have shadows. There are times where I choose to use a little bit of shadowing to separate something visually, but there isn't like a shadow pass where I'm doing an actual surface shadow on every character. But I do try to, in the spirit of the implied medium, represent various materials. So in this case, we've got the bells that are around each one of their necks. I tried to put a little bit of the reflection in the bells. Again, when I say in the spirit of the medium, though, it's not like a hyper detailed, glossy, realistic reflection. It's just more of like a subtle, hey, here's a little bit of color indicating this reflection type reflection. And we'll get to that eventually. Right now we're just doing all the sort of like basic, do I have everything down flat pass. Now again, this is all flats, there's not really any shadow. What I mean is the stuff that isn't a bell or a whistle, I guess. So it's like, well, the skin is this color, so it's this. The tooth is this color, so it's this. And then we'll later get into, well, what do I need to do with the bells to make those look cool? What do I need to do with the candy cane to give that a shine? Do I need to do something with the legs and hands and all that to make those stand out, which you can see that I did. And then is there anything I need to do with like a shadow in the mouth, or which is in there, as you can see, or a glint in the eye, that type of thing. So that's the pass that'll be coming up soon. Right there, for instance, there's the bells. They get a little bit of the green reflection on them. They get some other color reflections, and then they're going to get little shine dots on them to really try to sell that. Here's the candy cane now getting put in, and it's going to get one little streak of shine across it as well. So this isn't to go overboard with making it super realistic. This is just to give it a little bit of a hint of the type of material it is. You can see there with the sleeves, what I decided to do was make them 2 tones of red and have them be near each other so that they weren't too dramatic. Now I went in and just did some shadow that was sort of to separate certain things. The background that got brought in is the background from the Santa piece. The Merry Christmas that got brought in is the one from the Santa piece. Now I'm using some white to knock back things and put it in the atmosphere. And put the snow in. I put the exact snow from the Santa piece. I just wanted to make sure that there's like a certain amount of consistency, and borrowing from the original piece is the best way to do that. And then it gets a little bit of a watercolor texture, watercolor paper texture, and I put it into a frame that I just did really quickly in Procreate. If you want to see how I did that, you can actually go back and look at the Mrs. Claus piece from last year, and I explain exactly how to do the frame towards the end of the video. So, thank you for watching. I hope you all have a happy holidays and a Merry Christmas, and I'll see you on the next video. And if you're looking for me on the internet, these are the places where you can find me.